Welcome to this week's class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful chassidic discourse from the Rebbe. The name of the chassidic discourse is called Yehuda Ato. The Rebbe said this chassidic discourse on Shabbos, Parshas Vayechi, which in that year, it was in the 16th day of the month of Teves, in the year Tafshin Mem Vav, 37 years ago. So again, the chassidic discourse is based on the verse in this week's Torah portion where Yaakov Avinu is blessing his children, and he blesses his child Yehuda, and he says, Yehuda, Ato Yeducha Achecha. To you, Yehuda, your brothers are going to acknowledge you. So the Rebbe brings from the Alter Rebbe that he explains in his classical works on the Parsha and Torah, and the same thing also in the chassidic discourses afterwards, those that were printed and those that are still in manuscript form. And he explains over there what's the spiritual idea of Yehuda. Yehuda comes from the word of Apam. Now, Oides Hashem, when he was born, his mother said, now I'm going to acknowledge and thank Hashem. When do you thank Hashem? So thanking Hashem comes from a place, in Kabbalah I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate in place of what? A bittul. When a person's the level of acceptance, that's when you're ready to thank Hashem and acknowledge Him for all His greatness. So again, so Yehuda, what does Yehuda mean? Yehuda is represented by the idea of bittul, acceptance. That was his real power. You know, so we all know Yehuda was strong. What was his strength? His strength was that he had bittul, he had acceptance. Now, before they explain Yehuda on the level of acceptance, the power of bittul, so first they explain the spiritual significance of the other tribes. Who are the tribes before Yehuda? So you have Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, who are before Yehuda. And they explain it there as follows. What is the idea? What is Ruvain represented on a spiritual level? So Ruvain, when he was born, his mother said, Kira Hashem, Hashem saw. In other words, what does that mean? So Reuven comes from Re'iyah, to see. What does that mean practically on our level? When we serve God in a level of Re'iyah, we see godliness. So Reuven comes when we serve God, when we see godliness. Godliness is revealed to us when we see God. In other words, and everybody explains like this. What does seeing mean? Seeing means something which is close. In other words, so basically it's serving God in a way, the way God is involved in the world and you see God in the world. And like the verse says, and I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate, pick up your eyes on high and see who created this. So you're able to see in the creation of the world God. So when a person meditates, and you meditate in the greatness of God, and as it's, the expression is, Ma Godlu Masecha Hashem, how the greatness of Hashem, how great it is, or Ma Rabu Masecha Hashem. So in other words, when you think about how great God is, how God created the world, maintains the world, so in Kabbalah that's the way God is Memali Kol Almin, the way God fills the world. So when you look into the world and when you meditate, when you think a little bit, you'll see God running the show. Now, so where does this meditation come from? It's not from an aloof meditation, which is not grounded in reality, but this meditation comes from being grounded in reality. So this is called Re'iyah. You see godliness. It's closeness, that you see God in the world. So when you see it and you feel it, then you come to the level of what? Of Avos Hashem. Love for Hashem. So the avodah of Ruvain is when you see God into the world, and by seeing God, you come to love a God. And like there are quotes where it says, "Less pulchana derech." There's no great spiritual work like this, the work of loving Hashem, and love comes from a closeness. So again, so to recap, what he's explaining is, what is the avodah of Ruvain? The avodah of Ruvain is when you see godliness through meditation, realizing that God created and maintains the world, and that will bring you to loving Hashem. So Ruvain is seeing godliness, and therefore you love Hashem. Who's the next to the tribe? The next one is Shimon. What is Shimon? So when he was born, so what did his mother say? Kishama Hashem, Hashem heard. What does that mean practically on a spiritual level? It's referring to when we serve God, when we hear godliness. Hearing godliness. In other words, When do you see? Like Reuven, you see things that are in front of you. What do you have to hear? Things that you don't see, so you hear about it. So hearing is hearing about something which is not close. In other words, so what is it referring to? It's referring to serving God, things which are disconnected and far from the physical reality of the world. In other words, so the spiritual avoid is what you hear and you understand from things which are far away. And when a person meditates on things that are far away, so what emotion does that awake within the person? So when it's far away and you hear about it, it creates a feeling of yira, of awe, because when you're close to it, like Reuven, you see it and you feel it and you understand it and you can relate to that, you love it. On the other hand, when you're just hearing things from the far, that creates an expression of yira. So again, so Shimon is coming from hearing from far, which creates the emotion of yiras Hashem. So far we have Yehuda, which we started with, which is bittul, but then we went backtrack to start with Reuven, which is to see close, and it's Avos Hashem. Shimon is to hear from far, and it's Yiras Hashem. And then we come to the level of Levi. What is Levi? Like it said, like what his mother said when he was born, Hapam Yilava Ishi Alai. Now my Ishi, my man, is going to cleave to me. In other words, what does Yilava mean? It's coming from the word of cleaving, which is basically connection and becoming one. What does that mean practically on a spiritual level? That's practically it means when we do the mitzvahs that Hashem commanded us to do, there's 613 commandments, 248 positive, 365 negative, and we do the mitzvahs. So what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah comes from the word of tzafsa v'chibur, it creates a connection. And when you do the mitzvah, you literally become one with I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll translate, with atzmusa yemohusa yizborech. When you do the mitzvah, you literally cleave and become one with Hashem. So Levi comes from the idea of cleaving. Cleaving, we cleave to Hashem by doing Hashem's mitzvahs. Now, so again, just to recap before we go forward. So we learned that Reuven is when you see godliness, it's close, from Malik Kalam, that creates Avos Hashem, love for Hashem. Shimon is you hear from far, and that creates Yiras Hashem. And Levi is when you do a mitzvah and you create a deep connection with the essence of Hashem through doing the mitzvahs. Now I was going to explain the connection, how it flows. In other words, why does Levi, the mitzvahs, the connection come only after Reuven, which is love, and after Shimon, which is what? Which is Yira. Why does it come afterwards? And Rebbe explains like this. Because the fact is, what is the source? What is the energy that drives us to do all the 248 positive commandments, another mitzvah, it's our love for Hashem. Love comes first. When you have love for Hashem, 248 mitzvahs is very, very easy. If you don't have the love, every mitzvah becomes a whole struggle. Why am I doing it? And it's so much, and it's so hard, etc. So love is the driving force for the positive commandments. Yira, on the other hand, you're in awe of Hashem. That's the source of not wanting to transgress. You don't want to be disconnected from Hashem, and that will help you not transgressing the 365 negative commandments. So in other words, again, Avos Hashem is a source for all the positive commandments, 248. Yiras Hashem is a source for all the negative commandments, 365. Which is generally speaking, some terminology, I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate it. It's generally the idea of sur meira, going away from evil, and those not transgressing the 365 commandments, and asay toiv, and doing the mitzvahs. Which in Sur Meirah and Asay Toiv, you included in the all the mitzvahs. The Sur Meirah is the 365 negative, and the Asay Toiv is the 248 positive. Now, how does that happen? That happens after the introduction of Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. And then you come to the level of Yilava Ishi Alai, which is basically doing the mitzvahs, which creates the connection. So now as Rebbe is explaining beautifully, saying this, why does it flow from Reuven, Shimon to Levi? Because again, Reuven comes first. You have to love Hashem. Shimon comes second, you're in awe of Hashem. Once you're in awe, and then you love Hashem, then you have Levi, then you do all the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs come and creates the beautiful connection. Which basically, the third level of Yilava Ishi Alai comes after you have the Ava and the Yira first. Because once you have Ava and Yira, then you do all the mitzvahs. And that's why the Rebbe says, Yilava Ishi Dafka. It says Yilava, he's going to cleave. And what is the person called? It's called Ishi. What's the idea of Ishi? So Ishi is made up of Eish Shali, Ishi, my fire. What does it mean, fire? My fire? So it's referring to the fire that's down here in this world, and the fire which is on high. It becomes my fire. The Hashem's fire and our fire become one, which is basically the two powerful emotions of love and awe for Hashem, Ava and Yira. And once you have the fire of the love and you have the fire of the awe from on high and from down here, then you can go ahead and you have a love ishi alai, we cleave to Hashem. And like literally the way the verse says, and we know the verse is referring to Yaakov Avinu. And what is it? And when you love Yishalai, who's going to cleave to Leah? Referring to Yaakov. Yaakov's going to cleave to Leah. And we know Yaakov. Who is Yaakov? So you have Avraham was Chesed, Ava. Yitzchok was Gvura, which is Hira, and Yaakov is a fusion of the two. He's also the fusion of Tiferes, which is Ava and Yira together. So after you have Ruvain, which is Ava, you have Shimon, which is Yira, and then you have Levi, which is the fusion of the cleaving to do the mitzvahs. Then you come to the level of Yehuda, and Yehuda is Oides Hashem. Now I acknowledge Hashem, total acceptance. In other words, what's acceptance? What's Haidaya? Bittul, acceptance. And like it says afterwards, and we learned it already in the previous discourse, the Rebbe says after Yehuda, what does it say about Tamar bin Ledes? She stopped giving birth. Why? Because once you have acceptance, then you're totally plugged in, and there's no birth afterwards. You're totally there one with Hashem, and it's actually higher than Ava. It's higher than Yira, higher than Yilav Yishalai. Acceptance is the highest level. Why? And this is a powerful point the Rebbe says, because the first three of love, that's energy. Yira, it's also energy. Cleaving is also energy. There's something moving here. However, when it comes to Yehuda, that's total acceptance. There's no movement. You're totally one. In Abba, you're loving. There's you loving Hashem. In Yira, you're in awe of Hashem. In Mitzvah, you're doing a Mitzvah, you're connecting. So it's still two connecting. When it comes to Yehuda, when it comes to acceptance, then there is no movement, and you literally come on with Hashem. So again, Bittul is the highest. But now the Rebbe asks a simple question. What did we just learn? That Bittul is the highest. It's higher than Ava, it's higher than Yira, it's higher than doing the mitzvahs. Bittul is the one acceptance. Obviously you need everything, but in terms of levels, it's the highest level. The Rebbe says, 1 second, the fact is, brought down in other places in Chassidus, that Bittul acceptance, it's not the highest level. And on the contrary, acceptance is the beginning of any interaction with God. Before you start loving God, being in awe of God, and doing the mitzvahs, acceptance comes first. We just learned that you go from love to awe, doing the mitzvahs, and then you become one with Hashem. But the fact is, it's brought down many places in Chassidus that acceptance comes first, before you even start any process. And Rebbe explains the truth is that when it comes to bittul, there's two levels. When it comes to acceptance, there's two different levels. In other words, there's a certain acceptance that comes in the beginning of the work. And before you even start with love and awe and doing any mitzvahs, you have acceptance first. That's the first level of acceptance. But then you have the acceptance, which is at the end, which completes the avodah. After you have Ava, after you have Yira, or love and awe, and after you cleave doing the mitzvahs, then you have total acceptance, which comes again after Ava, which we said there's no work like the work of Ava, and you have the full level of Ava, and you have the full level of Yira, the full level of love, and the full level of awe, and you have the full level of doing the mitzvahs. Then you have the highest level of acceptance. So then you have the complete avodah of Yehuda, of Ata Yeducha Checha, your brothers are going to acknowledge you. In other words, and only afterwards, the higher level, then you're possible to be Yadcha Ba'er V'Vecha, your hand will be in your enemy's neck, etc. And like it's brought down in many places in Chassidus. In other words, so what the Rebbe is saying is, there's two levels of acceptance. There's a level of acceptance, which is a lower level, which starts at the beginning. Then you do to the full level of loving Hashem, the full level being awe of Hashem. And then you go to the next level where you're doing the mitzvahs. And then you come to the highest level where it's total acceptance. Now, it's powerful stuff. So the Rebbe says, from here, you have to learn a lesson in practicality, in the way we serve Hashem. In other words, because even though you can ask a question, well, you have to learn a practicality. The fact is, we know that there's a major difference between the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the tribes. In other words, because the fact is, every one of us, we all come from the patriarchs. And the patriarchs we received as an inheritance, the avodah of Avram, which is love, and the avodah of Yitzchok, which is Yira, and the avodah of Yaakov, which is Tiferes, which is compassion. So we all connected to every one of the avos. We all have it. However, the fact is, not everyone comes from all the tribes. Some come from Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, etc. So the fact is, what are we saying? We have to learn a lesson from Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. We're not necessarily connected to each one of the tribes. We're connected to all the patriarchs, not necessarily all the tribes. But Torah explains, no, that's not that. The theory that we come from a specific tribe and if we only have that avodah is not necessarily correct. And what does that mean? It means like this: every one of us is connected to a specific tribe in a strong way. So in other words, our main avodah is depending on which tribe we're coming from. In other words, but when it comes to the avos, that is definitely our main avodah. In other words, the main spiritual service that we have of Avram applies to every one of us. The spiritual service of Yitzchak and to Yaakov, love, awe, and being and compassion applies to every one of us. However, when it comes to the Shvat and the tribes, not everyone is our main avodah. That's not our main, our spiritual service. But nevertheless, even though it's not our main, but we do have a connection each one of the Shvatim, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, etc. So therefore, since it's not our main avodah, but we still have a connection, we have to know what is the lesson we're learning from Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. And like it's brought down in the Parsha, the Rebbe says, it says clearly, when Yaakov blessed them, it says, Ish asher kirbachasai. In other words, each one according to their unique blessing, every tribe got its unique blessing. But then it says, Beirach Oisam, he blessed them all together. And Rashi says, you might think that maybe everyone got their unique blessing and they weren't shared. So Rashi says, no. Beirach Oisam teaches us that they're all shared. It's a shared blessing. Even though everyone has their unique blessing, but it's still a shared blessing. In other words, every single one of the tribes, besides the fact that he received his unique, powerful blessing, he also received the blessings from the other tribe. So since every tribe received from all the tribes, so therefore, obviously, we have to learn a lesson from every one of the tribes, how it applies to us. And especially, that all the tribes are the children of Yaakov Avinu, and they receive Yaakov's blessings. And as we know, every one of the Jewish people are connected to Yaakov. And like the Alter Rebbe says in Igeres HaKodesh in Tanya, that the soul of Yaakov was a general soul, and all the souls of the Jewish people are within Yaakov. So even though the Rebbe is saying is, even though every tribe is different, but all the tribes share the blessing. B, all the tribes receive the blessing from Yaakov, and we're all connected to Yaakov Avinu. And that's why the Rebbe says, that's why also it's hinted in, the fact is that Yaakov had another name. What's the second name of Yaakov? Yisrael. He was called Yisrael. And what are the Jewish people called? Israelites. So everybody's connected to Yaakov. Everyone's connected to Israelites. Because Yaakov's name is Yisrael. And especially the way it's known, it says that why is Yaakov called Yisrael? Because Yisrael has 5 letters. Yud, Sin, Reish, Aleph, Lamed, which stands for Yesh, Shishim, Riboy, Oisias, LaTorah. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. In other words, that in Yaakov's name, every single Jewish person throughout history is connected to. So therefore, since we're all connected to Yaakov Avinu, we're connected to Israel, so after we have to learn the lesson from it. So the Rebbe says, what's the lesson? We do our work, and we do it in a complete way, which again, we go from Reuven. We love Hashem. Shimon, we're in awe of Hashem. And Levi, we cleave to Hashem doing mitzvahs. Then we come to the highest level of Yehuda, which is bittul, acceptance. And now, Oides Hashem, I acknowledge Hashem, total acceptance. Then we do our avodah, we'll get all the other blessings of Yaakov Avinu. Like he blessed Yehuda, and he says, Ad ki yavoi Shiloi, till he comes to Shiloi, Belu yikas hamim. And what is Shiloi referring to? Shiloi is referring to the King Messiah, like Rashi says. The King Messiah, that he is the king over everything. And the Medrash actually says, Shila comes from 2 words, Shailoi, like it says, Yovilu, they're going to bring the gift to the master. And the same thing also, Velu Yikasamim, because what's going to happen is, in the times of Mashiach, what's going to happen in the times of Mashiach is God's going to be revealed all over, not only in synagogues and houses, all over the world. God's going to be revealed. Even the nations of the world are going to realize that God is running the show. And like the Rambam says, when Mashiach comes, the whole world will be transformed and elevated, up to the point that the whole world is going to serve Hashem. And like the prophet says, the whole the nations of the world are going to have one clear language, and we're going to pray to one God. And it's like it says, we're all going to call b'shem Hashem in the name of God. We're all going to pray to Hashem. And like another verse in the prophet says, when God's going to be revealed, the whole world is going to accept God as the king. And up to the point where it's going to be an elevation in not only in the world, but also by the Jewish people. And what's going to happen is we're going to have Moshe is going to be back with us. Aaron's going to be back with us. And it's like it's brought down in many places that Mashiach is going to learn Torah also at Moshe Rabbeinu, and also the patriarchs, and how much more so the tribes, etc. Why? Because it says that with the revelation that's going to happen when Mashiach comes is going to be much higher than when the times of the patriarchs. So since the revelation is going to be much higher, he's going to have to teach Torah to the Avos. And how is that going to happen? So we know when we do our actions and our work, like the Alter says clearly in Tanya, and we basically love Hashem and awe of Hashem and do the mitzvahs. And again, most important, like we learned in this, the power of bittul, the power of acceptance. And we do it in these times of galus. And what's going to happen is we're all going to merit for the revelation of Mashiach. If ever finish off with a blessing, it should all happen b'mheira b'yameinu mamash, literally, quickly in our days, and literally ba'galul l'dan in the time that we are living right now. So here you have a short but a very powerful chassidic discourse of the Rebbe about the power of acceptance. Love, awe, and doing the mitzvah, the power of acceptance, and we do our avodah of the power of acceptance. We're all going to merit for the revelation of Mashiach, and God willing, our next class will be in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.